pricing, essentially, if we think about pricing, uh, you when you think about pricing, the question is like, why is that important? Essentially, it is important because there's a customer's willingness to pay for any product or service, right? So you wanna make sure that whatever, as a product manager, the first thing I want to say, and is like, you are the product owner. You're like the product CEO. You own that P&L, right? So you want to, at all times, ensure that the pricing that you got for your products is in a way where you're maximizing whatever your goal is, your revenues, your profits, or whatever that goal is, right? And how will you typically do that, right? Like, how do you put a price point out there? How do you know that something's this is the right price, right? So, easiest way, you would just go and you would test different price points. And the most common ways is you would draw out, like I show up here, you would just draw out your supply demand curve, and you'd say, like, hey, here's the price to quantity curve, and you would essentially say, like, hey, how much demand am I able to gather or generate for different price points? So on your y-axis you've got your prices, and on your x-axis you've got your quantities, right? So you try and see, like, okay, if I price it at $5, how much demand am I generating? So that's an easy way. Just plot out the different quantities, or the demand you generate for different prices, right? That's your demand curve. And the reason I'm introducing this is one of the pricing strategies later. We'll sort of touch on this, and that's why I wanted to just start with this. Don't want to go too deep. I just wanted us to understand that this is typically how you would do it. Right? Now, as you do this, like I was just mentioning a couple of slides earlier, your goal, whatever it is, if you want to maximize profit, you would essentially, you'd figure out, like, at which price point am I getting the biggest rectangle? The rectangle, which is the area under the curve, is essentially your P times Q, which is your revenue, right? And assuming revenue also translates to profits. Okay, if I'm maximizing profit, I'll see, like, okay, is the green block bigger? Is the blue block bigger? At what point am I able to generate the most profit? Okay, Sumit, you had a hand up. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was just trying to inquire it. I think you've been in the role where you talk about, offering services and products to external customers. In your case, the CloudFront, for example. But some of us come from an internal product
Sure.
management perspective, right? I do have had experience with both external and internal. But however,
Mhm.
I'm just trying to kind of ask, how could this question be answered with for someone who has been, working on internal product management and not external facing product management, right? Because the conversation about pricing probably may not come, right? Most of the organizations are cost centers. We don't talk about differentiating price, in different markets. How would I kind
Sure.
of answer that question?
So, if you let me try and understand your question again, and just make sure I'm getting this right. So, your question is, if I'm in an internal facing org where I don't really engage in pricing activities, how should I think about pricing? Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, let me try and fork that a little. One one thing that one is, if you are if you are thinking about a product that doesn't need pricing, because you don't need to maximize profits, you don't have the P portions. Okay, that's okay. Um, your role doesn't require that, so maybe you don't need that. But essentially, as a product owner, I'm sure you would still carry some sort of a P&L. You would still own the cost side of things. You would still want to optimize for all of that. And essentially, although you're a cost center, when you sort of like sell your product internally to someone, there's got to be some sort of a index, or some, like, at what price are you allowing someone else to subscribe your service, right? Like for example, I'll give you an example. Today, I'm at Microsoft, and like I said, I'm on the business planning side, which is all about pricing, right? And we own the entire commercial side of things. Uh, there are many services that are consumed internally, like Azure services are consumed externally for the most part, but compute, storage, and all of these are services that get consumed internally left and right. Now, our pricing for our internal customers is very different from the external customers, and I don't want to go any further than that. Now, the point is there are rules around how we want our internal customers to consume our products, right? So even if I didn't have any external customers, I would still want to understand like what is my cog structure so that I can set some sort of I have a position for my product for my internal customers. So that's how I would think about it, and think of it as this is the bare minimum that I need to cover to cover for my cogs. Does that sort of answer what you're saying? Because if there's not a need to sell your product internally, I'm not sure then why would there be a conversation around pricing other than the fact that I at least want to cover for my costs if you're a pure cost
Yeah,
center.
yeah. I completely agree with that sentiment. Because as a cost center, most of the organization, unless of course you are building the products at in-house, and also you're trying to compare your product with a comparable offering from outside, right? I mean that situation kind of arises every single day,
Mm-hmm.
whether I should buy or build, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if I'm building, should I choose option A or option over option B or vice versa, right?
Sure.
Okay, I get that point. Thank you.
Okay. Uh, but thanks for that. And I would also encourage everyone else if there's a nuanced question or even if there's any other question, please do bring it up. I don't have a way to look up everyone's hands unless Zoom has a
So,
feature where anyone raises a hand and it
Shivam,
asks them to. Sorry, go ahead.
Shivam Satish. So, for my, like in my world of SAP, ERP, like what we think is internally when we go to client, we always think that what's my cost, how many resources, what's the package of, we are offering, versus what I'm expecting from customer. So that's where I'm relating here. I think it's more or less same thing. It looks like what we can expect from client and what client will be ready to pay for my like services for implementation of the whole package. So and internally we also talk on and keep all our analysis on our team expenses, how much will be my services cost to my like our company, and how much we are getting from client, right? So I think some more or less same thing here,
Yeah, it's
pricing.
similar, but I think what Sumit is asking is, hey, I'm not even looking at an external customer. I just have internal customers. How should I think about pricing? So
Correct. Yeah,
it really comes, yeah, right. So I see the nuance there, but what Sumit's probably asking is, I'm not even looking at an external customer. Would this
correct.
be
Yeah, yeah.
relevant? How should I think about it? And I agree.
So
Just think
I
about
got
cost.
his question, but I was just overall trying
Yes,
to linking myself, my activity with the product management project. Yeah.
sure, sure. No, I
Thank you.
agree. I agree. Yeah, it's the thinking is still the same. My point is, in an internal customer situation, we may say like, hey, I'm not trying to maximize profit. I'm trying to keep the overall TCO for the customer as low as possible. Versus if I'm looking at an external customer situation, I'm trying to slap as much margin as I can to still make a deal and get a deal out there. So that's probably one thinking, but there could be many other reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and like I was saying, feel free to interject. Don't feel like you have to raise your hand or anything. I'm totally fine if you have to interject. Stop me, because if there's something that you could say that could benefit the team overall, let's do that. I don't need to be the only person talking. So
Right.
feel free to come off mute.
There was this situation recently, right? Where at my company, right? We're trying to
Mhm.
purchase. We're trying to purchase. A SaaS-based, master data management suite, and
Okay.
there are companies with which my team did a lot of POCs pilot to make sure that we are able to fulfill the base requirements, and then it came to actually how should we buy this. There are two options. One is purchase it from these vendors, one of them, or buy it from a marketplace, right? For example, Azure has its own, AWS has its own, so on and so forth. um, However, and as an organization, there's a negotiated price that is already available, right? So every year we renew the contract with Microsoft and AWS. So I could as a owner, I could go to marketplace and purchase it, and I'll probably get a sweetened deal for the same services that I'm getting from a third party vendor who is also a partner with your company and AWS. Or I could go to the vendor and purchase it from them. But the question then would be, am I getting it at a price which would be good for the company, or would it be something which essentially involve a lot of new negotiations if I'm going with the vendor? So there are multiple use cases that are out there.
Totally makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. That's very true. You're just emphasizing on the fact of that how real this is. So thanks for those insights, Sumit. Okay. So moving on. So I'll just bring these out, and so essentially, when you're trying to look at this P times Q sort of curves, the strategy is you you look for the block that maximizes your profit, right? Now, there is an inherent issue with this, and what is that? There's a problem. Like while I say like, hey, I'm making it look like so simple. I'm like, just go draw out your demand curve, and there you go. You figure out which block makes most sense, and go with that. But then there is an inherent problem. Any guesses? Like, what's the issue over there?
So you have to like experiment with a lot of price quantity combinations, and that may not be feasible always.
I was expecting you to kind of jump right on it, Prashant, given your background. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was spot on. Like, it's not that normal for me to know what the demand curve is. How do I know, right? Like, I don't know. So when I'm drawing a demand curve, again, Prashant, you probably have much better feel for a macroeconomic topic like this, given your background, and you're in some of these spaces. But so feel free to add if you want, or anyone else also. I don't only mean to single out Prashant. But essentially, uh, how do you draw your demand curve? You just ask your prospective customers. You ask them like, hey, I'm going to sell this at. You survey them. You ask for feedback, right? You do different things, and you try and understand. But then there are limits to that, and the limits are like what I'm thinking is. The demand curve, there's a difference between a short-term demand curve and a long-term demand curve. And what I'm after in terms of pricing for your product, from a product standpoint, I'm talking about drawing out the long-term demand curve. I'm not talking about short-term impact, short-term demand curve. Like, for example, if I've got, if I'm a seller of ice cream, or I'm just a consumer of ice cream for that matter, if ice cream was $10 a pint, I'd probably buy 1 pint. If it was $5, I'd probably hog and get 2 or 3, right? But again, so I'm sort of saying like, hey, in the short term, depending on how my price fluctuates, I may be able to pull in or out demand. But then those are short-term demands. That in itself has its limitations, right? So let me just get this out. Um,
I agree with that thought process, right? Especially in the in the SaaS space, right? Today, almost every company is trying out many different combinations of product and combinations, right? When it starts with when you start with that thought process, perhaps you know that you have a need, but you don't know how much of it that you have a need for. And would that need stay constant? Would it grow? If it grows, to what extent would it grow? You do not have a production data to tell you exactly how much would it grow to. And if it stays constant, then did you make a purchase which was cost sensitive? And why did you do it? Do you have units that are not being utilized? And as a cost center, or as an IT organization, I think you have to be accountable for how much of it is being utilized on a day-to-day basis. So as soon as you, as long as you're being able to identify the growing need in your organization for compute, storage, databases, combination of that, you are able to kind of look at a better predicted demand curve. But if it is not, then you have to start somewhere.
Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. Yeah, yeah.
So, one quick question, that sometimes the product is totally new. I'm just trying to think about iPhone when first time came in market. There was no other product like that. How in that case the forecasting and prospective customers, how do we guess is this product is going to be well in demand and people like?
Satish, I'll ask you to hold on that thought a little. Like some of the next set of slides is all about that. Like what are the different strategies we could use to get to pricing? Because essentially, as a product owner, I don't know how many people get involved in pricing, but that's a key component that defines your entire profits. You are the CEO of your product, and the basic requirement is to make your product profitable for your business, right? And what defines that? Well, there are many things that influence profitability. Pricing is a key component. That's why I chose to focus on that for the first round, and then get into the other things like, hey, how would you do different things? And again, Satish, I'm not drawing a tangent here, but I'm not trying to punt the question. I will get to that, and we'll touch on that. Essentially, what I wanted to say is I'm going to skip through some of the content there, but the main meta point here is, as you could be in a situation where you're in a FANG interview and they're saying, hey, tell me how you're going to estimate this, or tell me how you're going to forecast that. Don't box yourself, or don't limit yourself to, don't constrain yourself with once you set a price, don't forget that price to demand is elastic, that those things change, right? So you want to think about the demand curve at all times and think like, hey, what happens if I'm pricing it differently? Even if you've come up with a price, I'll try and touch on this later when we're going through an exercise. But essentially, when you've come up with some price, understand how that impacts their forecast, and what could your pricing do? Like think of it. There's two dimensions: demand and forecast. That's the meta point that I'm trying to make. When you come up with pricing, don't forget that you're also suggesting how you shape demand. As a product owner, you own that, right? So you got to be cognizant of that, and whatever you're calling out, you've got to think of both dimensions, not just prices. Okay? So pricing strategies, I think we've said that. So the first one I want to talk about, I'm going to go through like some 8 or 10 strategies. It'll go through pretty quickly, but I think those are pretty entertaining. So the first one I can think of is the most obvious thing. It comes to everyone's mind: cost plus pricing. So this essentially, what we're saying over here is your sale price is essentially you just take a cost, whatever your COGS is, you have a markup, and that becomes your final price, right? So to Sumit's point earlier, like if I have an internal customer and I don't want to mark up my price, then I just sell at COGS, right? So my internal customers are just buying at COGS. I am a cost center for sure, but I'm selling it at COGS to my other internal customers. And I'm not making any profits. Okay. So,
well, actually, it may not be about the profit in this case, right?
Yes.
So let's say you have a fixed cost, right? And that cost is the support that you provide, the licenses that you've procured or built, and everything included. However, there are situations when when you are building a product suite, there are situations where you are looking for exponential growth, and also exponential set of issues that are going to come in. There will be markup for that, because you're trying to hire more people,
Yeah.
or you are trying to increase the support from, say, 24 by 5 to 24 by 7. Your availability targets are 11 nines instead of 5 nines.
Mhm.
And those are your elasticity that is out there, right? And you need to be able to account for all of those. However, you don't have enough data to at the time when you're pricing your product to be able to compare that. You also
Fair
need to be
enough.
looking at the market and see, hey, if I had this kind of a situation with a certain other vendor, what will be their pricing gonna look like? Amazon AWS provides you with this kind of a capability today, where you are able to see the price at which you are offering the product, and you can compare yourself with them. And I'm sure Azure has something of that nature, like others.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. I agree with everything, and I'm going to touch on some of those too. So this model is fairly simplistic, right? Like you've got a cost, you're trying to slap a margin on top, and you want to call that your sales price, right? Fairly straightforward. The premise here is that you have a good understanding of your costs, right? So some of the advantages with this model is that you decide what your profit margin is. You are telling you are in control. You say like, okay, I want a 30% margin. I'm going to slap a 30% margin, right? I define that, right? However, there are some disadvantages here, and like what Sumit sort of indicated. First one, your sale price isn't accounting for competition. You're not considering demand changes in relation with the margins that you're trying to slap on, or you are considering it, but it may not be perceived well in the market, right? You may say, I want a 30% margin, but what if competition is not doing that, right? So those are some of the considerations that you need to have in mind. And essentially, if you are not aware of what the competition is doing, if you are not aware of how this impacts your demand, then you may just price yourself out of the market, or you may just leave value on the table. So either ways, cost plus pricing is a strategy you could use in certain situations. What are those? Like, what needs to be true for you to be able to truly do a cost plus? Anyone?
I have seen this happen. For example, if you build a storage capabilities, like say Snow Mobile, right? And you don't know at this point in time if there is a market for that, but you are first in the game, and you wanna still position this product in the market, and you don't know whether there will be a demand for it in the market or not. So you go with what you are offering, the next best alternative that we are offering, whatever is the price for that. Start offering this at this price, at that price. You are generating demand because it is a higher storage capability, mobile, that you can move from one facility to AWS regions. Then you are able to sell this there, and then there's a word of mouth that happens, and hey, from one to too many customers start asking for this new product. Then you jack up the price.
Yep. Fair enough. That's true.
So
Essentially, sorry, Prashant, go ahead.
yeah, sorry to interject. Sriram. I think the solution is in the disadvantage itself. So in scenarios where you don't have any competition, I think you can apply this model, or the scenarios where you have a monopoly, right? In some sense, again, no competition because you are the only player. So in those situations, you can actually apply this.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. Thanks to both of you. Both of you hinted at pretty much the same thing, but Prashant, you just called it out specifically. That is exactly right. You are in an advantage only if you don't have competitors here. Like he said, the solution's in the disadvantage here. So if you don't have competitors you have to compete with, then you know what, it's all yours. The market's yours. You're monopolistic power. Go price however you want, as long as you can still attract customers, right? AWS has always done that, and they've always subscribed to a cost plus pricing model. And their simple rule of thumb is, hey, get to market first, right? Be the first ones out there. You define what the industry's got to be. You define what the market's got to be, and customers will come, as long as you also have prices that are attractive. Now, you can't say I want 100% markup and expect the entire demand curve to fall in place, right? So something like that. But very true. As long as you've got some power in the market, you don't necessarily need to be a monopolistic power, but as long as you've got decent power, and if you're first to the market, you don't have competitors, all of those are situations where you can look at cost plus pricing. Okay.
There could also be a point about fear. Let's say compliance, right? You have a product that is highly priced, but then the disadvantage of not having that product is that you are non-compliant, and if you are, then there are several fallouts from that, right? You may not get the customer. You may have to sell your products cheaply, or you may go out of business. So that position is also there, right? And therefore,
that's a good angle.
Yeah.
Totally. Compliance and all that. Yeah, that angle definitely is there. And thanks for highlighting. Yep. The second one is where it's more straightforward. You're trying to price to match competition. And essentially, what I'm saying here is the market price is already sort of like established. The range is already there. And competitors have determined your pricing. There's only so much you can do when you come into a market where the product's pretty saturated. People understand pricing. People have an expectation for pricing. They're tolerant within a range. The tolerance is bounded within a range. You can't really deviate way too much, right? Now, when you're trying to do this, you could consider a slightly lower price to attract have that attract the price sensitive customers. The example of this goes to Walmart versus Whole Foods, right? And if you're trying to get to slightly the premium customers who are who have higher willingness to pay, you may try and have a slightly premium product, or have some premium differentiation, and you price your product slightly higher. Like if I look at Starbucks versus Dunkin' Donuts. Coffee is coffee, end of day. Yes, there is some differentiation in the way the coffee is made and the way they market their product, to do with just brand itself, right? And all of that perception allows them to command a slightly high premium. But end of day, this coffee is coffee. There's only so much of a range within which it can operate, right? So I'm essentially pricing to match my competition, but I'm able to either squeeze a little more out of the customer, or I'm able to undercut and I'm able to price my product slightly lower, like low prices every day or whatever Walmart calls it, right? And I'm able to sell more just based on being able to attract to a certain segment that values lower prices. Again, assuming quality and all of those are still within range, they're all okay. Lastly, on this one, if you are dealing with a product that is commodity, there's only so much you can do, because your customer is inelastic, right? As soon as you think about commodity product, the first thing that will come to most people's mind is bread, right? Bread is a simple commoditized product. Bread is bread. Of course, if you're looking across categories of bread, like organic bread, multi-grain bread, white bread, and this and that, those prices could vary. But once you're within a certain category, there's only so much for you to play with, right? What you're looking for there are volumes and not price being a differentiator itself. So once you're in a certain product, like if I'm in front of a shelf, and I'm probably typical of most people, I just go pick the one that's closest to me at my eye level, or just the one that's most colorful. Price is not really a big, because I know all of those are within the same range, right? So all I'm trying to say is, if I have a product that is commoditized in my, if your interviewer is asking you or telling you like, hey, uh, why don't you price out this product for me? And if they've given you a product, just given my background in CDN, CDN is a commodity product, right? It is all that I'm selling over there is a bunch of bandwidth, right? If I'm looking at a product that is commoditized, unless unless you have some wrappers around it which make it look and feel different, if you are purely dealing with a commodity, don't make the mistake of trying to sell it as a premium product or try and do anything else. Commodity is commodity. There's only so much that the market's going to accept, right? So, like I was saying during your interview, consider price matching if your product is homogeneous and it's commodity, and or the market is highly competitive. And pricing is your differentiator given the lack of product differentiation. Right? So slightly higher, slightly lower if you have the ability to stretch the customer a little and squeeze that additional value from the customer. Right? So moving on, the next one is price skimming. Price skimming is basically where I think Sumit, you or maybe Prashant said this or something similar. But essentially, or maybe it was Satish, I can't quite recall. But essentially, you come in at a high price, right? And then over time, you sort of like allow the price to reduce. And I think this is Satish. Probably this is what you were talking about previously when you brought in the construct of the iPhone. So,
Correct. Yeah.
right. So this is what I was trying to refer to. Like when you come in, and I think your question was more on the lines of how do I even determine what that high price has to be. Right? We'll also touch on that a little. But this is what you see. Most of these high premium products, they launch at really high prices, and over time they let that price come down. That does require that these companies or these products have some sort of monopolistic power. If not, who's going to buy? Right? And the next thing is it works for products where customers like it. Customers have got to like it. If not, why would they even want to pay that high price to start with? Right? So you've got to have some sort of a charm in your product, some sort of premium features. You've got to have some power in the market, and for just to stay within this price skimming strategy, you've got to have a way to lower the price for this product over time. So essentially, if you think about the iPhones, what happens? They launched iPhone 3, and 6 months later, 10 months later, there's 3 became old, so they had an iPhone 4. 3 is being sold at a lower price, right? So you got to have older generations and like that end of life cycles and typical with phones and also the automotive industry, right? Where they constantly keep updating, bringing out newer features, newer products. So that's something that's got to happen. Introduce a product at a high price and over time let it fizzle by drop the price on that, make it more attractive to the masses, and meanwhile you've got a newer product in your product roadmap that's taking that high price position. Right? So
I have a
Sorry, go ahead.
viewpoint on this. Yeah, I have a viewpoint on this, right?
Right,
If you think about the industrial, I'm just taking an example, right? If you think about the 3D modeling or 3D printing technology, right? The base components that is used for that 3D printing was itself so highly priced at the time. You didn't have the variation. All you could do was print a certain material type. You couldn't print every material type, right? Nowadays, it's very common. So definitely, if you are offering that as a product in the space, you will have the high price because your procurement cost is on a higher side, and you don't know the demand, right?
So are you suggesting that there are situations where prices could be high simply because I'm not sure what my demand is, and also I don't know if I'll have other generations of the same product. Is that what you were where you were getting to?
One point is that, and the second point is your raw materials is costly, right? So you do not have, you know,
Yeah, I think Sumit is saying initial first time manufacturing cost can be much higher than going forward. Like once you get to
Spot on.
get this product mature in the market. Yeah.
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly the advantage with something like this. When you have high R&D costs, Apple's got high R&D costs. The automotive sector, and like you just brought up this 3D printing, I'm not very conversant with the situation you bring up, but based on what you said, so much high R&D costs or high procurement costs, whatever there are high costs. This is one good way for me as a company to offset some of that, right? Milk the customers upfront. Those are willing to, early adopters or whatever you call that segment, right? Get as much upfront, especially Apple. Like the craze is, I don't know if it's slowed down now, but at least until 2-3 years ago, I've always seen like any new iPhone release, and there's like queues outside New York and this front, and all of these Apple, big Apple stores. There are queues for Apple products. So somehow they've maintained that craze for Apple phones, right? And they're able to extract a ton of that high R&D cost up front, right? So totally agree. Yeah, that was exactly the advantage that I wanted to bring up. The downside with this though is if you think about the early adopters that I just talked about, you leave a sore taste in my mouth, right? Like 6 months down the line, if you're just giving away that phone for half the price that I purchased it 6 months ago, like I feel sort of ripped off. Somehow Apple's not seeing that. I still don't understand how or why, or that they just have a varied set of customers who are always eager. Like the early adopters are the early adopters. Sorry, Satish, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think that's why the trading came in picture, right? Give the old one and get the new one.
Totally. And I was about to say, like, there are workarounds, and perfect. That was a strategy that they used to keep those early adopters still keep coming in, and they know, like, yes, I agree. Right. So the key point with this strategy is if you're evaluating a product as part of your product sense, product execution, if you're talking about products which are high value, right? Unique, have some differentiation. You have some power in the product. This is probably one strategy you can think of, assuming you also have a roadmap of products. So some of the clarifying questions you could ask when you put up with, hey, you're a product owner for this product. Tell me how the market's going to evolve. Tell me what the product launch strategy is going to look like, and this and this. A few clarifying questions could be around, hey, do I have newer versions of this product? What sort of power do I have in the market? And that would give you a sense for, is price skimming a pricing strategy you could even look for, right? So you want to be cognizant of that when you're in your interviews. Yeah. Moving on, penetration pricing. I'll start with this. So penetration pricing essentially is a strategy where your sale price is just above your marginal cost, right? So if you think about on the cost side, you've got fixed costs, you've got variable costs, right? And your marginal cost is essentially saying, like, hey, for every additional unit that I get out, what additional variable costs am I consuming? Or what is my cost for every additional product that I'm manufacturing? So let's say I'm a manufacturer. I'm a belt manufacturer. So I have factories. My costs are factories, resources, electricity, this and that, right? So the cost of my factory is a given. That's a fixed cost. Right? There are fixed costs. There are variable costs. So the things that vary with every unit that I'm manufacturing, all of that's my variable cost. So I'm talking about that becomes my marginal cost, right? So this strategy is essentially saying, like, in the strategy, you on purpose launch your product just above your marginal cost. You're only covering for your marginal and your fixed cost. You're saying, I'm going to eat that cost for a little bit, but and the hope is, and why we are doing this. Let me get the reason I want to do this is my goal could be things like I'm coming in new to a market, I'm a new entrant, or for whatever reason, my goal is to go grab market share. And my hope is when I do something like this, I don't have immediate compete triggers. Competition is not able to react immediately. If not, that will just trigger a price war. I lower my price, they lower their price, I lower my price, they lower their price, and essentially it becomes a zero sum game there, right? That's the context in which you want to be thinking about penetration pricing. And the point is, gain your market share, grab your customer base, and eventually over time you increase your prices again. Now, one way that companies do this is they don't systematically just drop their prices. The way companies do this is they offer it through mechanisms like coupons, ads, seasonal sales, sale prices. All of these are ways for me to drop a MSRP price down to just about my marginal cost. They may or may not do it, but that's one way to do it. And you're covering for your marginal cost, and the goal is to get your customer base, keep them attracted, keep them glued into your ecosystem, and then after a while you take out that coupon. After a while you take out that sale. Customers will still continue to buy it just because of habit, right? And you've got the market share now, and now we slowly are taking them back to their original prices. So I find this happening a lot around seasonal promotions. Like I can give you an example. Like back in December, I recall my daughter and wife. We were at the mall. I'm in Seattle. We were at the mall. We were buying something. Worked out pretty well in terms of pricing. Something didn't work out. I recall like early February, late Jan, we were trying to go replace it, get a replacement because we felt like something else, which was also in our consideration, we want to buy that instead. Prices just went back up. Like they were so much more expensive. So the point is, I did end up buying that still. Now all that I didn't have that sale price being offered on this other product, right? So my point is, they somehow did get me with a sale price. So they artificially dropped prices, got me in, locked me into their ecosystem, and now my daughter was very set on this other product. She wanted that instead. So essentially, I still paid the higher price. So that's the logic here. You introduce it at low prices artificially, and then slowly you raise your prices up again. Satish is trying to. Yeah, Sumit, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to kind of interject every single time, but I was just thinking, right? SageMaker Studio was just launched by AWS, for example, right? They were using SageMaker has been well known, but then they identified that this new product is a new AI ML technology that is out there. What they have done in the past is offer SageMaker at no price, right, to anybody who is using that, and then slowly create a parallel product which has a higher usability. But then they themselves were not sure at the time that we should be building this. And over a period of time, they got feedback from the customers. Their market was leading towards that, and then they launched this new product. So once you're using SageMaker, then it is easier for you to switch to this new one. But then you already are using the base technology there.
Sure. Like if you are an existing customer, it makes even more sense because your customers now are just getting additional value, right? For additional products, for newer launches. They're able to come in. That's the whole point of promotions, right? I'm doing promotions to just gain market share, to increase usage, utilization, and all of that. So totally. Thanks, Sumit. That was a good example in context.
So, Sriram, is there any other real life example of this particular strategy? Any product you can, one or two product you can
Absolutely.
refer?
Give me a second. We will get there. Hold up for a minute, Satish. Again, I'm sorry, I'm playing that card on you again. But it happens all the time. Like think about coupons. Right? How many times do you get coupons in the mail where they're saying like, hey, loaf of bread for 5 cents or something like that. Bottle of wine for uh, 2.99 and everything else. So they artificially could bring prices down, right? Coupons is like happening all the time. That's a mechanism that they want to grab market share.
Want to become a software engineer at Google? You can, like thousands of our students. You just need to learn from those who've already cleared FANG interviews. At Interview Kickstart, our interview prep courses are developed and taught live by 150 plus instructors from Tier 1 companies like Google and Facebook. Our courses are tailored to help you crack software engineering domain interviews, including back-end, full stack, machine learning, embedded systems, data science, and more. To learn more, book your free webinar slot today